Hello, Vicky here and welcome to this week's edition of the Bond Room Unlocked, whereby I'll be inviting you to turn the key with me on my 26-year-old Bond collection and George Lazenby.
This never happened to the other fella.
Indeed, and the other fella being Sean Connery, who portrayed the role of James Bond for 6 years and was becoming fatigued with it. The Bond star was losing interest as production was taking up too much of the year and resulted in there not being enough time for him to do other projects. He wanted out. He likened the role to that of Frankenstein's monster. It kept coming back. And so Connery hung up his Walther PPK and it was time for a new Bond. After 4 months of auditioning, Australian used car salesman turned model George Lazenby won the role, and with it came On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
It is common knowledge that On Her Majesty's Secret Service is the best film ever made. But why is that? Today, I shall be looking at some items from my collection to explain why George Lazenby is the best Bond.
Thanks, Chris. Chris will be joining me today as we briefly delve into Lazenby's Bond. The trouble with a new actor or actress taking over in an established role is that they're always compared to the original, and this was Lazenby's biggest obstacle. He had to try and make the role of Bond his own within the parameters.
One item from my collection is a reproduction programme from the Royal Premiere. And I'm just going to read a paragraph from this that compares Lazenby with Connery. Physically, Connery and Lazenby share some notable male assets. In the words of the producers, with an eye to the boudoir activity that is a feature of any Bond movie, they both strip well. I think we all know what they're saying there.
Oh, I think we catch your drift, Chris. Now, George was a very physical Bond, and in my opinion, he was at ease with the fight scenes. Now, one that springs to mind is the hotel fight, whereby Bond tussles with Chi-Chi.
Tracy? Tracy?
Now, this physicality would see George moving on to martial art films later in his career under the watchful eye of the late Bruce Lee.
Another aspect of my collection is some Italian photobusters, which each highlight different aspects of the character that George portrays in the movie. This top one here shows that George is adept at skiing from the use of the ski helmet. Here you can see George using a gun. And the final one here shows that George's 007 likes nothing better than a damn good snog.
So let's take a few minutes now just to look at those 3 areas that Chris pointed out. Now, On Her Majesty's Secret Service can be considered a Christmas Bond due to its wintry landscape, skiing, tobogganing, and of course the fantastic Piz Gloria Blofeld's lair. Now, the piece of memorabilia I want to share with you today is one of the Sideshow figures. Now, back in episode 9, we had a look at the figure of Zhao. So, if you haven't seen it, take a rewind and look for episode 9. But today I want to share with you the Sideshow figure of George Lazenby. Now, remember that these figures were produced back in 1994 and featured 23 key figures from the series. So to start, on the front of the box we don't have a picture of George as such. We have the poster from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and they just don't make them like this anymore. Brilliant poster, far up, far out, far more James Bond is back. Then on the inside, if we just open it up, we have the mission statement and cast list, synopsis if you will. And then of course we have the figure of George as Bond. Now, in this particular figure, Bond is wearing the mountain suit that is used to descend in the climatic Piz Gloria assault. Now, most of the henchmen in the film were wearing white commando style outfits and a black beret, and to distinguish himself and Draco from those, they both wore blue. And it also prevented audiences believing that a blue screen was used for effect and not real stunts. So there we go, we have George in his blue mountain suit. The only inaccuracy with the suit is that he has laced up boots in the film. George does not have laced up boots, but everything else is absolutely spot on. Just zooming on George's face. There we go. And then also we've got the Walther PPK and also the Sterling submachine gun as well. And then of course the stand if you want to take it out of the box. But this is a sealed unit. And then just on the back we have a little bit more there about the character, some stills from the film. So there, and also there is a figure of Telly Savalas also within this group of figures. Now, Chris also mentioned that George looked comfortable holding a gun. Now, the gun barrel sequence is a good example of this. Now, because it was a new actor, the producers decided that they would change the gun barrel sequence. So we have George Lazenby walk on, wearing a hat, drop down onto his knee and fire at the screen. As for Chris's third statement, doesn't all Bonds enjoy their favourite pastime?
Finally, I would like to read you a paragraph from the excellent book Martinis, Girls and Guns by Martin Sterling and Gary Morgan. And this really reflects my feelings about George's performance during the film. Best of all, though, is George Lazenby. Has ever a performance been so underrated in movie history? On Her Majesty's Secret Service works because of, not in spite of, George Lazenby's James Bond. Sean Connery's insouciant invincibility, so perfect in Goldfinger or You Only Live Twice, may have marred and certainly would have weakened the essential humanity of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is the one film where James Bond could not and should not be a Superman.
George's performance as Bond is a softer interpretation to that of Connery's cold, brute force agent. And George basks in the stalwart cast that he has around him. Diana Rigg, Terry Savalas. And their experience bounces off him. And what we see is a calmer version of a 007. Still prepared to do what he must for the mission, but with an added vulnerability. Would Sean have played the finale scene of On Her Majesty's Secret Service if he'd have been committed to the role like George? I think not. It's raw and it's heartfelt.
Then I go.
It's Blofeld. It's Blofeld.
It's all right. It's quite all right, really. She's having a rest. We'll be going on soon. There's no hurry, you see. We have all the time in the world.
Well, I hope you've all enjoyed those little insights into my collection. Now I hand you back to Vicky in the Bond room.
Thank you, Chris, for joining me today and giving us your insight and thoughts into George Lazenby's Bond. Now, the purpose of this channel is to take the items in this Bond room and relate them to the films that we know and love. If you have enjoyed this Lazenby-esque edition, then please give it an MI6 stamp of approval and click on the notifications below. Why not subscribe so you get to stay in the loop too? Now, you can also find me on Facebook and on Instagram and catch me co-hosting with SpyMovieNavigator.com, cracking the code of spy movies with Tom Pizzato and Dan Silvestri. So check out those podcasts now. And most of all, I'd like to thank you for joining me and George in the Bond Room Unlocked.